Alrighty, we are recording. Anyone jumps on later, I'll let them in. This is trauma and essential oils. Now, the way I'm going to do this one is it's going to be mainly me chatting, and I'll chuck a few images up. But I really wanted to start with the fact that a lot of us are dealing with a lot of trauma right now. And I'll explain a little bit about me and my background for those that don't know me. So my name's Nicholas. My brand is That Health Dude. I'm a CHEK practitioner, which stands for Corrective Holistic Exercise Kinesiology. And I've been studying with the CHEK Institute for 10 plus years. I've also done my personal training certificate, my Reiki master, quite a few other courses as well. And I've also had an essential oil business with doTERRA for close to 9 years now. And so I personally use the essential oils for a very long time. So I've got that experience, but I also have acknowledgement and understanding from a holistic health perspective of how essential oils are so powerful and why we use them. Now, the way trauma works, most of us are living from patterns and hurts, traumas, things that happen to us between 0 and 7 and 7 and 14 years age. So most of us, if we look at society, we're also acting as if we're kids, babies, kids, or teenagers. Most of us have not evolved into adulthood. So although we physically look like an adult, our emotional intelligence, our level of emotional, our emotional span hasn't ever passed the age of a teenager. And that's because we haven't dealt with the trauma that happened to us when we're in that age. Because in that age, we're quite innocent. We absorb a lot of information. We take things like we're like a sponge. So if somebody says something to us, somebody does something to us, we believe that we deserve it on some level because we don't have, as an adult, we can have a deeper understanding of that shouldn't have happened, or that person treated me or disrespected me in a certain way. And that, so there's that type of trauma. So there's a trauma that somebody does something to you, something happens to you from outside. And that's generally what happens. We don't walk around and go to try to cause trauma in ourselves. Generally, when people are really unwell, they will try to do this, and it's to try to generally escape from a suppressed trauma that they may or may not be aware of. A lot of sexual abuse victims like this, they want to cause themselves more trauma because on a deeper level, they believe that that's actually what they're worth, which is sad. And it's just because something happened to them when they were such a vulnerable child. Now, so that's what we're really looking at. When we're dealing with trauma, we're generally dealing with trauma from 0 to 7 and 7 to 14. And these traumas, what they do is they repeat patterns in our life because we react and we respond in ways that are formed by that trauma. So we may think that, we're making a decision based on logic or intelligence, but generally it's based on a reaction to that program that happened when we were 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, whenever it was. We react from that. Now, build upon that a lifetime of these type of things happening. So something happens when we're 5, something again happens when we're 12, something happens when we have our first girlfriend or boyfriend and they break our heart, and in our early adult, we lose a job, we go bankrupt, we have deaths in the family. All these type of traumas are then layered upon each other. And what we want to understand is if we can actually get to the root trauma this pattern will stop repeating, because this pattern is repeating to teach us, because we believe on a deep nervous system level that that's the story that is for us. So for example, so me as a child, my mum and dad separated, and my dad, oh, what happened there? It's when I put my hand up like this, the little hand symbol comes up. They were separated when I was quite young, and then my dad was kind of in and out of my life, and he wasn't really in my life. So the story that I created then, which has gone throughout my life quite a bit, and it's a very deep thing. When something happens between 0 and 7 years old, it's quite deep, right? So it takes a lot of empathy towards yourself and understanding towards yourself, and to break the neural pathways. So, because what happens is when a pattern is formed, the body will always take the path of least resistance. So that pattern happened there, where I created a story that I wasn't worth love, that I didn't deserve a dad in my life, because etc etc. So that abandonment story, whenever something similar happens in my adult life or through my teenage years, that story, that's the easiest pathway. Oh yeah, that's because of that. That makes complete sense. And so it's like like I have goats, right? So for example, the goat track, where the goats walk towards their food or their shelter, that becomes more and more entrenched, because that's the same path they go. Even though there's a whole other field, they will always go that same path, because that's the path that they know. If that path is blocked off, then maybe they'll figure out a way to go around it, but most of the time they'll try and push through first. And so this is the same as the way we react, is we will always go back to that root problem and that trauma, that initial trauma. So that kind of, I guess, gives you an understanding of how it just repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. And the reason it repeats is because on a soul level, we're actually here to break patterns. We're actually here. These traumas happened in our life, and to somebody, it might not look as a trauma, right? But in your nervous system, it was a trauma. And so that's where people can sometimes say things like, oh, harden up, wasn't that bad, etc., etc. For example, the death of a pet. If you really, really love that pet, someone that might not have had such a strong relationship with a pet might say, oh, it was just a pet. And to you, you're like, your whole nervous system is like, just a pet? This was part of the family. This is a major loss. Because a lot of the time a pet is somebody's longest friend, always been through them, through all the ups and downs, etc. And so the trauma is a personal experience of how it's affected your nervous system. And that depends on multiple things, right? If you're already stressed at the time, lots of other things going on in your life, maybe your nutrition wasn't the best, maybe your sleep wasn't the best, all these other factors, then something that might have been a minute trauma actually becomes a major trauma. And this is why you see people have breakdowns sometimes from things that they might have been able to cope with in the past, but because they had the layers of trauma, that pathway that's just continually getting bigger and bigger and bigger, they had the breakdown. And why we have the breakdowns is because so we can finally have a breakthrough, because then we start doing the work to unravel what actually was that original trauma, or that first major trauma that's repeated itself in our lives. So what do essential oils do? Why are they great? They're great for many, many reasons. One is when you breathe them in, it goes up into your brain, right? So it starts instantly creating new pathways. And the kind of statistics are we use less than 10% of our brain capacity. And so what happens is we actually start expanding our capacity to think outside the box. So instead of thinking down that same neural pathway over and over again, we're actually thinking outside. So that's one reason that they're really, really powerful. Two is we actually are not just our physical body, right? So we have our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual body. So we have like layers around us. Sometimes some people can see them, some people can feel them. Sometimes if you put your hands close together like this, you can actually start to feel the energy of your bodies, like you can do it where your chakra energies are. You can actually feel before you physically touch the body where your energetic bodies begin, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. Sometimes it's hard for me, as I'm a person who feels my way through life. So sometimes the words don't actually match up to, my explanation of things is a little bit off because I just feel. So it's like I just know, oh, that's where that person ends, that's where I begin. And for example, this is where what the difference between an empath and a narcissist is, and we all have narcissistic tendency, we all have empathetic tendencies. But an empath is somebody that has to figure out that their own personal boundaries because they connected with everything. And a narcissist is someone that has to realize, oh, there's actually other people in the world. So that this is, the boundaries start hitting. One person is like, someone's hitting that person's boundary, and the other person, they start hitting other people's boundaries. So when people start standing up to them and, not letting them get away with certain behavior, they're like, oh, well, there's other people in the world. That's just a little side story. But so what happens is we use these essential oils to start to retrain the pathways, and we start to look at the deeper traumas that are the outer layers of the physical body. So, for example, you might have something that happens to you when you were 4, 5, whatever, but generally that could even string from your parents or your grandparents. So there's generational trauma. And so a lot of that generational trauma is in the emotional, those bodies that kind of surround the physical body. And so why these pop up for us is because we actually want to be clearing these traumas to change the generational pathway. And that sounds deep, a lot of responsibility. But that's why we had it. So we as a soul came into this body and said, you know what? I can handle all these things happening to me because I'm going to break this curse, this generational trauma, and I'm going to be the one that does the work and faces this trauma, these emotions, these things inside my body. All right. So the way I personally work with the essential oils, and this is what I recommend most people to start with. There's the emotional wellness kit, which has the lavender peace, adaptive balance, citrus bliss, and clementines over there. Forgot to pick that one up. And it comes with a diffuser. Now, so the reason that I recommend starting with that first is because I find these help to just ground us a little bit, and they help to us to understand the broad spectrum of emotions. So this is what I wanted to share with you. The wheel, is that the negative? No, that's a positive. Let me stop share. I want to share negative. Yep. Press the wrong one again. Give me a sec. Oh, well, it wants to go with a positive, so we'll go with a positive first. So this is what we want to anchor in, some more of the positive emotions, okay? And so most people will be like, I want to feel more love, or I want to feel more clarity, or want to feel more peace, right? And if you've never seen this emotions wheel, it's this website, essentialemotions.com. But our emotions are far more complex than just the word love, for example. It's a little bit small, but gentle, tolerate, forgiving. Can't read what that one says. It's a little bit blurry, but there's, in just this square here, there's 6 different emotions that are related to love. So what I love about the emotional wellness kit is it actually brings us to understand that what we think generally, like how people feeling good or bad, and that's generally where most people are at, is good or bad, right? But we live far beyond good or bad, and so that's where most people are stuck, right? Because they don't have the awareness that there's more emotions than the one that they were looking at. Here we go. There's a negative one. That's clearer. I don't know why the other one's not clear. So let's have a look. So what we do is we start with the emotional wellness kit is what I recommend, and then we just start having a look at some of the emotions that we have, right? And this is great, this emotional wheel, but what I love about these 4, and I'll grab the other one in a second, is they're really simple. So when we're starting to feel traumas come up and having emotions come up and all these type of things, first we want to start with just getting ourselves back into the base. So we have Lavender Peace, which you see it's got Restful Blend on it. So whenever you're feeling, I use this one whenever I'm feeling anxious or having those occasional anxious feelings. This is the go-to oil for me. And so I always think it's like Restful Blend. Okay, so my nervous system wants to have a bit of a rest. It's tensed up, it's anxious, right? Then we have Adaptive. So this is Tranquil Blend. So this is like when you need to have, you're like, I need to go to a spa and just go to some tranquil environment where I don't speak to people and I just am getting a massage and I'm just, that's what I need right now, right? So Adaptive is for when you're in complete overwhelm, when your nervous system is just absolutely fried, right? Balance is Grounding Blend. So when you're too much in your head, this one brings you back down into your body. Citrus Bliss is Invigorating. So when you're feeling kind of stuck and heavy, so remember, trauma will sometimes, just make you close down and not do anything, and you can't feel you want to get the ball rolling again, but you feel like you can't. And so Citrus Bliss is for that. And Clementine, which is the other oil in that kit, that's really good for, it's a citrus oil. So anything citrus is uplifting. It brings joy back into your life. So the reason I like to start with these 5 when we're dealing with trauma or we're dealing with emotions is because we're starting to, before we get into the wheel and we start going into the depths of what we're really feeling, we're actually just being proactively when we're feeling, we've got 5 things there. When we're feeling need more joy, Clementine. When we're too much in our head, Balance. So we need grounding. When we need some invigoration, Citrus Bliss. When we need some tranquility, Adaptive. And when we need just to rest and calm down, then it's Lavender Peace. So those 5 things are great as a starting point to get us in the zone to actually have that awareness of our body again. And then when we are confident in being proactive with that, that's when we can actually shift into going deeper and, for example, using something like this emotions wheel. So if you see the emotions wheel, like most people, as I said, they think they're sad, sadness. Let's use sadness. But what are they actually? Are they being pessimistic? Are they grieving? Is that why they're sad? Dejected? Do they feel unloved? Do they feel like um, loss of something? Sad, defeated, heavy-hearted, estranged, despairing, regretful. And so one of those words, if you're like, I'm feeling sad, you would then go in and you would actually sit and go, oh, which is this actual word that I'm feeling? Right. And you would go through and you would actually then look at the oil that relates to that actual feeling. And that will help to anchor in and change that pathway that I was talking about before. All right. So with trauma, like, we can go in far into depth and we can go a lot into this, but this webinar is just simple about helping you to understand the basics of trauma so that you can take some steps straight away. And so for those of you that are watching the recording, if you don't have a starter kit, a starter pack of oils, that's the one I'd recommend to start with. Okay, so, and you could either get that through me if you don't already have an account and you don't know anyone. If you know somebody, go to them. If you already have an account, these 5 oils, I would just start consistently using them so that we can start to help the body understand that you've got the coping mechanisms and some tools to start going a little bit deeper. Because what happens is if people go too hard with this trauma stuff, you can open a can of worms, right? And if you open that can of worms and you don't have the tools to actually reground you, get you back into your daily routine, it might just completely add a whole nother trauma on top of the trauma that's just popped out of this box. And so we want to be gentle with ourselves, and people are a little bit impatient. But the thing is, if you've been holding in a trauma for 30 years, 40 years, yeah, you can shift it pretty quickly. However, there is so many layers of things attached to that, and they're all going to come out at the same time. So this is why I personally use essential oils in my life. I use them in my food. I use them, like I don't have cologne or for women perfume, like, because that's another stress, another trauma adding to the body if you're adding toxic things to your life. So what we do is we start to clean up all the different areas of our life. And I find essential oils really powerful to anchor in habits, because what we do is when we smell them, when we breathe them in, balance is my fave, by the way. Balance, I use this across the left and right hemisphere of my brain to get them integrated to work together, right? Most people are too much in their logical brain and not in their creative side. But so when we are anchoring and using the oils for certain areas of our life, whether they be ones that we use before we go for exercise, ones we use for after exercise, ones we use when we want to focus, ones when we use when we want to calm down, and when we use when we're stressed, all these different things, right? We're starting to anchor in healthy habits, and we're using smell, which one is one of the most powerful things for the memory bank. And we're starting to shift from this negative emotions on this image on this screen into positive habits, right? Because negative emotions will generally cause sabotage patterns, habits that are not life affirming. Or as CHEK practitioners, that we have optimal choice, suboptimal choice, and no choice, right? So that's what we teach. So suboptimal choice would generally come from having a negative emotion. Sometimes a negative emotion is good because it's like, oh no, that doesn't feel right. And so then we create an optimal choice, right? But long-standing negative emotions, they don't really serve us, because the trauma, the incident, whatever has happened a long time ago, but we're still holding on to that negative emotion and it's causing us pain. It makes us feel safe at a certain level, which is a whole nother, I guess, depth of understanding of this, is we hold on to these emotions because it's our known. And as if we let them go, it becomes the unknown. And this is what I'm talking about with the box that just kind of opens up. It opens up into a completely unknown world. And so people can literally lose their mind, freak out, because everything that they thought they knew about themselves no longer there. And so they have to rediscover everything about themselves again from the age of that trauma that they've dealt with. So you can see what I'm talking about. You might be like, I'm 38. If I go back before and deal with that trauma from 4 to 38, there's 34 years I have of myself that I've lost. And I don't know, that part of me is not there anymore, right? It's still there, but I've got to recreate that journey again. And so that's quite a long time. So if you go straight to that trauma of 4, rather than understanding your emotions, creating those lifestyle habits that are optimal, learning about your health, and taking those, so it's layered. So what happens is, by the time you get to that 4-year-old trauma, you might have already dealt with 35-year-old trauma and 28-year-old trauma and all these other traumas on the way. So you've actually already created the new pathway, and now you're just doing that little bit. You're not actually doing the whole pathway, which is quite a lot, depending on how many traumas. Some people have lived very easy lives. Some people have lived very challenging lives. Now, what I wanted to talk about as well is the last 3 years of everything that happened in the world. There was some serious trauma that happened. I can get rid of this negative emotion wheel now. There was some serious trauma that happened. And that trauma affected all of us far more than we realize. Now, you've got the trauma of the news 24/7 telling you you're going to die and everyone's going to die and everyone you love's going to die if you don't do this, right? And you can't go out of your house, and so that, because it's so dangerous to even breathe fresh air, right? So that's a trauma in itself, right? And then there's the trauma of, like, I just did what was right for my body, right? So I still went outside and I still went to the beach, and it was a lot, the restrictions weren't as enforced where I live compared to somewhere like Victoria, Melbourne, right? But like, even the trauma of not being able to get sun, the not being able to see your friends, not being, and your family, a lot of people's income streams kind of became insecure. The constant threat of the next lockdown, the constant threat of the next financial crisis, or the next thing that's going to affect your health. Then there's the constant fear of, like, the talk of war and all these type of things. So this is a lot of trauma for people to deal with. And what people don't understand is, like, maybe 50 years ago, when technology and you couldn't just jump on the internet and then you've got the news, like, having that amount of stimulus that's not generally saying, wow, how amazing is the world, look at humanity, look at what we're doing great things. It's generally very negative. We're not supposed to deal with that amount of trauma. And so most people are completely fried. And this is why I'm saying start with something that's like simple. There's 4 I was there, but with the clementine that's over there. Starting with something that's quite simple, because then we're just kind of easing our way into it. And so that's what I would recommend for anyone that's dealt with trauma or dealing with trauma. Now, of course, if you get a doTERRA account with me, then we can all sit down for half an hour, 45 minutes online, and I can actually be very specific with you from a practitioner level, to be like, okay, start with this, but then I'd recommend going down this pathway. And so for all of us, we're individual. The other 6 oils, I can't remember what they're called, there's 6 of them. if you've got a doTERRA account, their emotions something. Let me just I'm just going to do a quick little search on this one so that I don't sound silly. Where is it? But the oils are peace, console, forgive, motivate, passion, peace, and cheer. Interesting that I forgot cheer, hey? So that was a good example of, for example, a trauma response. And I'm not saying it's specific, but everything has a meaning generally. So I can remember 5 of the 6 oils pretty easily, right? And then there's one more, cheer. All right. So generally what happens is when we have trauma, we block certain things out of our life. So we might block having cheer, like happiness, out of our life because of that story we created. And so for me, it feels like that I actually need to use cheer out of all those oils. Cheer is the one that I need to use more of and to get back in touch with myself. Right. And so the way we look at the way I teach is we have each of those 6 oils. I can't remember what it's called. Emotional something kit. But there's those 6 of those oils. They're all color coded. So the way I work, one's red, one's orange, one's yellow, one's green, one's blue, one's purple. So this is just the way I personally work with them, not the way doTERRA created them for that, but seems a coincidence to me, and this has worked for me. So red one, which is passion, that is the root chakra, right? For me, that's how I use it. And so that's 0 to 7 years old as well. So we can you can topically put them on with passion. Be careful because it's got cinnamon in, so it's got to be heavily diluted because it's a very sensitive area down there. Or you can just breathe it in and you start to really do your work around that 0 to 7 years age. Yeah. And we can, and the energy around that chakra, which you can just Google what they all are. But they generally have themes. So root chakra is safety and security. So if you have certain times that you didn't feel safe and secure when you were growing up, between 0 and 7, then working on that is a really powerful thing as well. So that's kind of the next step that I recommend for people when they're working on themselves to expand their emotional intelligence, to delve deeper into trauma and the layers of trauma, because we want to peel them away slowly, right? And then the next phase that I recommend people go through, it's the kids kit. Again, they're color coded. And so, and the reason, even though the kids kit is more diluted than the other oils, the reason I recommend doing kids kit last is because we're starting to then really work on those deeper emotional levels that are even more sensitive than the physical body. And so what happens is we can bring up some pretty big stuff, right? And if we bring up, as I said, too much stuff, it can really affect us quite deeply. So I like to teach people emotional wellness. The other kid that I can't remember the name of that's got those 6 oils that I said, and then the kids kit. And so those 3 layers of emotional intelligence can go quite deep. And there's different protocols I teach people, etc. And then you've got all the rest of the oils, but you've got a really solid base then. And then you could start targeting specific things. Okay, well, there's this sadness and it's because of some type of loss. And I'm going to target that with the specific oil that works really well for that. And then I'm going to anchor in using the positive side. I'm going to anchor in this. And you're going to use the oil that anchors in that. Now, understand that this is a process, and be gentle on yourself, because it seems really simple, right? But emotions are messy as hell, and trauma is messy as hell. And so the trauma that's occurred on us has created, even if it's not existed, it has created some. If I let go of this trauma, I'm going to die. So the body will think that I'm going to die if I let go of this trauma, this pain, this hurt, this anguish. I'm going to die if I let go of it. So we want to be really gentle. And this is why I say surround, you're surrounding yourself with all these oils and all these different habits and patterns. And to when you finally get to that thing that's going to go, you've got so much support around it, that support of people, support of oils, support of your tools in your tool belt for your health. So for me, one of mine is surfing. Getting in the ocean is great for when I have big things pop up. So it's like, okay, cancel everything that I planned on today, surf. Or if I don't have the energy to surf or the capacity, I go and sit with my goats. So I'll smell some oils and then I'll just go sit in nature with my goats, and they'll bring me back down to earth, right? Get me out of whatever's happening in my life at that time. And so we create all these coping mechanisms and tools so that the deeper we go, we're not going to just blow up. And this is probably the biggest kind of mistake that I shouldn't say mistake, but the challenge I see with the personal development world. People go hard and they blow themselves up, and then they have to come to practitioners like me to rebuild them, because they've just gone and now they can't even find any part of who they are. They've kind of lost everything, because they've gone from a 50-year-old that's gone back to a 2-year-old trauma. So 48 years of them has completely disappeared out of existence. And now there's a 2-year-old trying to get back to 50. So you can imagine how hard that is. Whereas if we went from 50 and we dealt with the major trauma at 46, so, there's 4 years, and then we dealt with and we dealt with and we dealt with, and we get back down to 10 and 8 and 6 and then 2, they've got the rest of that life experience, and they're grounded in their body that they can deal with that trauma, because they're actually coming from a really grounded place. They're coming from a 50-year-old that's say they were 50 years old. They're coming from a 50-year-old that's dealt with, say, 46 years of their trauma, and now they're just dealing with the 4, and they've got 46 years of adult experience, much of that being an adult, a capable, logical, intelligent adult who can then be the support person for this innocent being that needs help and support. And so this is where people go too deep. They need to bring in someone else to be that adult, because they're like, I don't even know where I am. I don't know who I am. And as a skilled practitioner, that's easy for me to guide people down that path. And that's why I have a mentorship program where I work with people for 12 months to deal with things like this, because otherwise, like people trying to do it on their own, it's really, really tough. So I think that is all I'm going to talk about today. I just wanted to touch on trauma. Nobody came on live, so I couldn't go through some of the exercises that I wanted to go through. And it's just a process, and you have to be gentle with yourself. And the first and only thing that you really need to do is you start. When you start, you are being brave, you're being courageous, you're moving through these things. If you don't start, then you're going to be exactly where you are in 5 years when you do start, right? So the earlier you start, and don't be a perfectionist, understand it's going to be messy, you're going to have challenges, then you're going to have some, you're going to find out who you really are. So what I recommend is one, have a mentor if you can afford it. So you can reach out to someone like me. And otherwise, start with the oils, like a kit of oils. And that's the kit that I recommend starting with. Of course, you don't have to, it's your journey. You can do whatever you want. But for me, that's a really grounded place to start. And you can either reach out to me and get a starter pack through me or somebody else, or if you've already got an account, make sure you use these oils regularly. Because what happens is we can start to invest in ourselves, but then our sabotage patterns come in. So I would be just grounded into how you can use those oils on a daily basis. So there's touch points throughout the day that start to build in those new habits. Yeah, hopefully that helps a few of it. If you want to learn more about the oils, or if you want to learn about my Project Vitality 12-month mastership program, mastermind program, that's where I'm with a small group guiding you for 12 months, and we really focus on quite a lot. And we focus on bringing back passion in your life, purpose in your life, and pleasure in your life. And we use that Health Dudes philosophy, which is first we focus on your health. So we focus on your health first, then we focus on your confidence, then we focus on your relationships, and then we focus on your lifestyle, right? And then the sabotage patterns can tap into every single one of those areas of their life. So anytime a sabotage pattern comes up, I'm there to help you so that you can move through it. And that's the beauty of having a mentor, is that if you don't, when those sabotage patterns come out, you don't really know what to do. Or you do, but it's really hard to, because you're looking at it from only one perspective. Whenever you've got my perspective as well, we can do some magic together. So anyways, I will send this recording out to everybody that registered, and I'll also probably post it on YouTube. And so if anyone has any questions, please reach out. Peace. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording.